Imagine a world transformed, like really transformed. A planet starting to heal itself. The air getting cleaner, rivers running pure again. Huge areas of wilderness coming back where they used to be.
It sounds almost like, well, a dream scenario, doesn't it? Something maybe way off in the future.
Exactly. Beautiful idea.
But what's really kind of startling, maybe even a bit unsettling, is that our sources suggest this isn't some distant fantasy.
Oh.
This huge environmental shift, this almost miracle, it could apparently kick off like literally the day after the last cow dies.
Wow. The very next day. That's a heck of a thought experiment.
It is.
And that's exactly the what if we're diving into today. What actually happens if, poof, all 1 to 1.5 billion cattle just vanish overnight?
Right.
So our mission here is to really dig into this complex, frankly, kind of shocking idea. We'll look at the surprising environmental upsides the sources talk about. But just as importantly, we need to face the staggering human cost this would bring.
And the source material, it even gives this like incredibly specific hypothetical start time just for dramatic effect,
What is it?
As of 4:30 p.m. EDT on Friday, July 4, 2025.
Okay, it's very precise.
Very. And, while this picture of a green revival sounds amazing for the planet, it also, well, it comes with this huge shadow, a really steep price, meaning the potential collapse of entire cultures for like over 1 billion people. Traditions going back thousands of years just gone. And a food crisis that's frankly beyond anything we can probably imagine today.
Okay, let's really get into that first part then, this vision of a healing Earth.
Right.
Let's start with greenhouse gases. Now, cows, maybe not the first thing everyone thinks of, but our sources make a strong case about their impact. Methane, specifically.
Absolutely. It's easy to overlook just how much methane comes from cattle. Their digestion, basically, enteric fermentation.
And numbers.
Well, each cow pumps out about, say, 220 pounds of methane a year on average. And methane, it doesn't hang around as long as CO2, but while it's there, it's potent, like 28 times more powerful than CO2 over a century.
28 times.
Yeah. So our sources point out that livestock overall and cattle are a huge part of this, contribute somewhere between 11% and maybe 18% of all human-caused greenhouse gases. Often you see the figure 14.5%.
That's significant.
It's huge. And the key thing here, the real insight from the sources, is that getting rid of cattle wouldn't just reduce emissions, it would like instantly slash this massive methane source.
Right, because sudden drop.
Exactly. Which gives us not just, a bit of a breather on climate change, but potentially this critical window, like an unprecedented chance to sort out our energy, our agriculture.
Yeah.
It buys us time.
A window of opportunity. I like that framing. The benefits don't stop there, right? The land. That's another huge piece of this puzzle.
Oh, absolutely. This is where the scale just gets mind-boggling.
How so?
Okay, so right now, agriculture uses about half the world's habitable land. Half. And get this, somewhere between 77% and 80% of that farmland is used for livestock, mostly beef cattle.
80% for livestock.
Yep. But here's the kicker. That huge area only produces about 2% of the calories people actually eat globally.
2%. That's incredibly inefficient.
Strikingly so. So if the cattle vanished, you'd free up this enormous amount of land. We're talking an area roughly the size of North and South America combined.
Unbelievable.
And that land could just start rewilding, forests regrowing, grasslands coming back, wetlands reforming.
And these aren't just pretty landscapes.
No, they're vital carbon sinks. They'd start pulling massive amounts of CO2 out of the air. You'd see carbon sequestration speeding up, biodiversity bouncing back, soils healing on a scale we can barely picture.
That image is powerful. A planet breathing again, almost. And what about water? Does that picture improve too?
Dramatically, according to the sources. Think about all the pollution from manure runoff.
Right. And fertilizers for feed crops?
Exactly. All that nitrogen and phosphorus washing into rivers and oceans. It fuels those huge algal blooms, creates those massive dead zones where nothing can live.
Awful stuff.
Take away the cattle and you suddenly cut off a major source of that pollution. Almost immediately. The sources suggest rivers would run clearer, oceans would get healthier, marine life would start to recover pretty quickly.
It really does sound like an environmental utopia taking shape.
It does. That vision is incredibly tempting, isn't it? An easy fix, maybe?
But there's always a but, isn't there?
There usually is. As tempting as this environmental fix sounds, based on our sources, it's really only half the story.
Okay, so let's pivot. Beyond the environmental models, there's the human cost. You said it was devastating. Where does that unraveling start?
It starts with money, well, livelihoods, the sheer economic scale,
Right.
the livestock industry. It's not just farms, it's a global thing with trillions of dollars, and it directly supports, get this, 1.3 billion people.
1.3 billion.
Billion, yeah. That includes huge ranches, sure, but also millions and millions of small farmers, especially in places like Africa and Asia.
And for them, cows aren't just livestock.
No, not at all. They're economic lifelines, literally. Living savings accounts. They give milk, meat, sometimes draft power for plowing. Their status. They're often the only way a family can climb out of poverty, you know? Sell a cow to pay for school fees or health care or during a drought.
So if they suddenly disappeared,
yeah,
it's not just an industry shrinking.
Oh, it's obliteration. Total obliteration of livelihoods for those 1.3 billion people. Instantly.
And the ripples.
Exactly. The ripple effect would be catastrophic. Think about it. The meat industry collapses. Dairy collapses. Transportation networks that move this stuff, gone. Leather industry, gone. Even things like gelatin, some medicines, they rely on byproducts.
So entire communities just fall apart.
Rural communities, especially the ones heavily dependent on livestock, plunged into chaos. Mass unemployment. Destitution on a scale that makes, recessions look minor. It's an economic earthquake. Global stability would be shaken profoundly.
That's hard to even grasp. And beyond the economics, you mentioned culture. Our sources talk about cultural devastation, too.
Yes, and this is perhaps just as deep, maybe even deeper in some ways, because for so many societies, cows are way more than just money or food.
They're sacred.
In many cases, yes. Deeply symbolic. Take Hinduism. Cows are revered as agya, meaning not to be killed, untouchable. They symbolize life, motherhood, abundance.
Like Lord Krishna as a cowherd.
Precisely. And the divine cow, Kamadhanu, the giver of prosperity. You see this reverence in India's gaushalas, the cow shelters. They aren't just animal homes, they're sacred places.
That connection runs deep.
Incredibly deep. Or think about, say, the Maasai people in East Africa. For them, cattle are wealth. They define social status, identity, their whole nomadic lifestyle, their rituals, their diet. It all revolves around their herds. A young man standing, tied directly to his cattle.
Wow.
And it's not just those examples. Our sources point out that across history, from ancient Egypt's bull cults to Zoroastrianism's sacred oxen, cattle have represented fertility, power, sustenance.
So losing them.
Losing them would mean silencing traditions thousands of years old. It would sever this incredible 10,000-year bond between humans and these animals, a bond that literally shaped civilizations. It's like erasing collective memory, erasing identity.
Okay, so this brings us to a really tough spot, this huge dilemma. Survival, but at what price? It forces you to weigh this up. A healed planet versus, well, a fractured humanity.
A struggling, potentially starving humanity.
Yeah, and the sources highlight a really critical part of that struggle, nutrition. Why would losing cattle cause a nutritional crisis?
Because meat and milk are nutritional powerhouses. They're packed with high-quality protein, obviously, but also crucial micronutrients.
Things that are harder to get from plants.
Much harder or less bioavailable, meaning our bodies can't absorb them as easily from plants. We're talking about vitamin B12. You basically only get that from animal products reliably.
Right, B12.
And also really absorbable forms of iron, zinc, calcium, essential amino acids. These aren't just optional extras, they're vital, critical for kids' brain development, for preventing anemia, for bone health in older people, for healthy pregnancies.
Especially in developing countries, I imagine.
Absolutely, especially where people rely heavily on milk or meat because diverse plant-based diets aren't available or affordable.
So, okay, if cattle disappear, how do you replace those nutrients for billions of people globally?
Well, that's the problem. Our sources call it a logistical nightmare.
Nightmare.
Yeah. You'd need massive global food fortification programs adding vitamins and minerals to basic foods.
Yeah.
Or distributing supplements on an unprecedented scale.
But could we actually do that effectively?
Think about the logistics. Getting the right dose of supplements to every child, every pregnant woman, every elderly person, every day, across the entire globe, including remote areas, conflict zones. The sources are pretty blunt. It would likely fail the people who need it most first.
Leading to
widespread malnutrition, potentially, even outright famine for billions who depend on cattle for essential nutrition. It makes you question if our current global civilization could even function without them.
Wow. And just when you think it can't get more complicated,
Yeah.
we have to circle back to the environment again, don't we?
We do.
Because that green utopia, the rewilding,
Mm-hmm.
it might not be that simple either.
Exactly. The sources raise this really important point. What actually happens to all that freed-up land? Does it all become pristine wilderness? Or does a lot of it just get converted to grow crops for humans?
Mm.
If billions switch to plant-based diets, you need a huge increase in farming things like soy, corn, grains.
Right, people still need to eat.
And that shift brings its own set of environmental headaches. Think massive increases in pesticide and herbicide use.
Contaminating ecosystems, harming pollinators.
Yep. Huge demand for water, for irrigation, potentially draining rivers and aquifers in new places, and more biodiversity loss because you're replacing diverse pastures or even forests with vast fields of just one crop monocultures.
So you might just be swapping one problem for another.
You could be trading cattle problems for industrial crop problems. And there's another wrinkle, too.
Yeah.
Sometimes cattle, when they're managed properly, actually benefit ecosystems. Their grazing can stimulate grassland growth, prevent invasive weeds. Their manure fertilizes the soil naturally. They're part of the cycle in some places.
Like ecological engineers almost.
In a way, yeah. So just removing them abruptly might disrupt things we don't fully expect. It could change fire patterns in grasslands, mess with soil health. It complicates that simple green utopia picture. It raises the question, would it definitely be a net environmental win or just different?
Okay, so wrapping our heads around all this,
Yeah.
what does it all mean? This whole deep dive into a world without cows, it really does paint two incredibly different pictures, doesn't it?
Absolutely. A stark duality.
On one side, the sources show us this possibility of a cooler planet, land healing, water cleaning up. It sounds amazing.
It does.
But then the other side, it's just devastating. 1.3 billion people potentially losing their livelihoods overnight. Entire cultures vanishing. The real threat of hunger on a massive scale is, almost unthinkable.
It really is. And that dual narrative, I think, says so much about our incredibly long 10,000-year relationship with cattle.
How so?
Well, the sources show it's been, destructive environmentally. In many ways, we farm them now, but it's also been fundamentally life-sustaining for humanity, culturally foundational.
So it's not a simple case of good or bad.
Not at all. It's deeply complex, and it suggests that the way forward probably isn't just about getting rid of them entirely. It's likely much more nuanced, needing adaptation, innovation, not just eradication.
That makes sense. So for you listening, here's something to really chew on based on this impossible choice we've explored. If you were faced with that day after the last cow scenario, what becomes the priority? Is it fixing the environmental damage, even if the human cost is immense? Or is it protecting human lives, livelihoods, and cultures, even if that means the environmental healing takes longer or needs a different approach?
It's a profound question. No easy answers there.
Definitely not. And look, this kind of deep dive, asking these big, complex questions, this is the kind of stuff you can explore more over at Mind Expansion Daily.
Yeah, great resource.
If you're fascinated by these global challenges, these big what-ifs that shape our future, like we are, then you should really check them out. Visit Mind Expansion Daily. And hey, while you're thinking about it, be sure to like and subscribe to Mind Expansion Daily wherever you get your information. It helps support explorations like this one.
Definitely worth doing.
Until next time, keep asking those big questions. Keep exploring.